Welcome to the Redwire series by Vodafone Business. My name is Taryn Williams and we're here today to talk about how to build a culture for growth within your company. I'm joined by some experts in our field. Fiona Young, Chief People and Culture Officer at EFTPOS, and Julie Bradshaw, General Manager of HR for Vodafone. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So to start, I just wanted to share this quote that I found in the Harvard Business Review that I think really sums up culture so well. It says, culture tells us what to do when the CEO isn't in the room, which I think, of course, is most of the time. So, Julie, I just wanted to find out from you, how did you go about creating culture within your organisation?
So for us, culture is really about how we work together to serve our customers. And the way that we go about creating that within the organisation is about being very clear about the behaviours that we think are going to set us apart in how we work. So for us, that's around accountability, collaborating well with one another, having empathy for the impact that you have within the business and being responsive to customers. So those behaviours and being very clear about those behaviours is important for us in setting the culture up. And then backing that up with different policies and processes and systems that support and reinforce that. So how we reward people, how we review performance, those sorts of things. And then also, those things that we do that recognise, what great looks like. So who do we reward and celebrate and recognise in front of their colleagues?
And Fiona, EFTPOS has nearly doubled in size over the last few years. As a company grows, how do you maintain that culture?
I think it's interesting when you talk about culture, because it's such a big thing. Culture's not, it's not something you do over here outside of an organisation. Culture is everything you do within your organisation. And so for me, I kind of put culture into different buckets. I think about processes, systems, the thing that makes my day-to-day working life easier, so I'm not spending my time searching for information. Yeah. I think there's the trust bucket, so I'm really clear on what my job is and I'm trusted to go and do it. There's the leadership bucket, which is around, do we have strong strategy? Do we have the right leaders in place? Can they tell the story of what we're attempting to achieve? And then there's that real piece around psychological safety. So, that kind of links back to trust, but just ensuring you have the psychological safety in the workplace, that people feel they can get on with their job and make decisions themselves, I think is really, really important.
And I wanted to ask you both as well about the idea of customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction being in some way linked. Are they inextricably linked? Can you have one being great without the other being great? And how do you positively impact both of those?
I think really the culture is how customers experience your brand. So, particularly if you're an environment that's got retail or contact centre, those sorts of things, every time a customer's engaging with your team, that's an experience of the culture and how they behave and how happy they are, how much they're enjoying the work that they're doing, a customer will feel. And similarly, I think if customers are not having a great experience, that really impacts the experience of employees and how happy they are at work.
Yeah,
so they're absolutely linked and reinforcing of one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And also that piece around broadening out the concept of customer is really critical. So your customers might be the people outside of your organisation, but everybody internally has customers as well. You all serve each other. So knowing who it is you serve in the organisation and who you need to provide great customer service to. And particularly in people and culture, you do it a lot, but in all sorts of areas in companies, legal, etc., finance, your job is to support the company and, they're your customers out in the organisation. So really understanding that has huge impact on your external customer service as well. And then measuring it. So really knowing, most companies are really measuring their customer engagement these days. Net Promoter Score is pretty standard in most companies. But then measuring your employee satisfaction and using similar metrics can be really helpful. So we're introducing an employee Net Promoter Score in EFTPOS, so we really understand, how people feel and whether or not they would recommend EFTPOS as somewhere to work.
That's really interesting. And I'd never thought about the concept of people having internal customers. As you say, if you work in a department like HR, you're actually serving an internal customer team, not external.
Absolutely. And I think embracing that, your job is to advise and to serve people. Embracing that is really important. And, we don't love to do that in Australia. We don't love to to serve. It's not really natural in our culture. But I think the more that we can understand that we have to be of service to everyone in the organisation, the more we start to build that, and that really filters out to customers as well.
Yeah. It actually just comes into what I wanted to talk about next, which is about communication and feedback loops. Obviously so fundamentally important, and exactly as you were touching on about how do we share that experience from external customers as well as internal. What I wanted to sort of pick your brains on it, how do you build that internally? How do you sort of foster that idea of helping each other grow and a commitment to that growth and building culture through internal communication channels? And do you have any sort of hacks or tools that you've used or processes that you've implemented internally to do that?
At FPOS, it's interesting, we're in the midst of a whole digital employee digital experience project.
Wow.
Which is around what tools do you use for what communication. Because I think if you're not really clear on we use a full team meeting for blah, we use Yammer for something else, we use Teams for our chats, all those digital tools, they're all fantastic, but you've got to know what you use for what and make sure everybody understands how to use them, because if everybody's using different systems, it doesn't work. But if you can get that stuff right, it's really, it's so easy. We're also used to using social media. We're also used to chatting with each other. Email's a little bit, it's great for external communication, but most people don't really use a lot of email internally now. And then it's really using your forums, like your social media forums, internal social media forums, for, particularly an organisation that's a bit bigger, for your recognition and, having those full group chats, and as well as your face-to-face things. I think they've got to be really important as well.
That's really...
I think the multiple tools that are out there at the moment can create confusion and a level of overwhelm for people.
Absolutely.
We certainly do a combination of things at Vodafone. The communications is really important to us. I think the face-to-face piece, you can't lose sight of the face-to-face, so people still really value us doing all hands with 1,000 employees all together.
Wow.
We do big recognition events there, which is really about driving the culture around these are the people who have really led the culture and led the performance of the business, and we do that in those big forums, and also to create a lot of alignment across the organisation in terms of what we're focused on. But the other things like Workplace by Facebook, we use, and people really value that to get social connection with one another, to recognise one another. It's enabled us to do things like having our executives really available to our people. So we do live Ask Me Anything sessions where they'll be filmed and anyone in the business can ask them any question that they want to. It really puts the executive on the spot, but it means they're really accessible and can give information out pretty quickly into the business.
And it means your information opens up to everybody.
That's right.
So you can have a conversation that isn't just between two people, and it might be really important information in there, and suddenly everybody can see it and everybody can participate. And sometimes those chats can go on for a really long time because it'll become a really long discussion, and then it's open access for everyone.
Amazing to show the power of social media, not just for external communication, but internal.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
I think too, though, just on the recognition thing, you've got to be really careful as well, though, because public recognition doesn't work for everybody. Yeah. So your relationship recognition is really important. Some people will really only want their manager to recognise them, right? They don't want to be, and even for me, I love a spotlight, but I don't really want to receive a reward for something that I did in my job. I'd rather my manager just come to me and say, great job, well done. Yeah. So I think it's really knowing what works for different people and sometimes different teams as well. You can build, we talk about company culture, but little teams have their own cultures as well. There's pockets of culture everywhere in an organisation. So really knowing that team, your actual manager is so important when it comes to culture. It's all about your people management bench strength. It's critical. And knowing what your team needs from a recognition point of view is so important.
I think the why someone's getting recognised is also critical. Yeah. My son, he's 6, got an award only last week, which was very sweet, and I was very proud, and he was very proud. And I said, what did you get it for? He said, I don't know, Mum, they just give them to you. So if your recognition's doing that in the organisation and people aren't clear, it's probably gone to waste.
Yeah. Not quite the result we were after.
I love that.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about taking risks in a company or an organisation, because I think as humans we have this inherent idea that taking a risk or changing the status quo is going to be dangerous or going to lead to negative outcomes, and I think we're inherently a little bit risk adverse. So how do you build a culture internally that taking a risk is okay and encourage those internal ideas to start change in a company?
So I talk a lot about psychological safety in the workplace, and there's been a lot of research done. I listened to a podcast the other day actually on the highest performing teams in companies like Google, etc., where what they've come back to is psychological safety. So these people feel really safe in the workplace, and when you feel really safe in the workplace, then you're willing to take more risks. If everything around you lines up, if you know how to do your job, you feel trusted, you understand the strategy, you're clear on your role, all of those culture buckets I spoke about before, if they're all really clear for you, then you're far more willing to put yourself out there and take a risk. If you don't feel psychologically safe in the workplace, if you feel like you're going to get blamed or someone's going to say, why did we do that? Can't believe we did that. The can't believe is the one that I can't stand. Can't believe we did that. Then you're not feeling safe and you're not going to take those risks. It's a little bit like, when you go travelling and you go into an international airport and you don't really understand any English and you go, I'm not safe. Your body goes straight into, I'm not safe here. And I've got to figure out all these systems and I've got to work my way through it and then I'll feel safe again. And the workplace can be the same, if you don't have all those pieces lined up, then that safety just isn't there. So, and you'll get it in buckets, again, you'll get it in teams where there's a lot more safety than there is in other teams. But overall, you've got to have that built through the whole company.
Yeah. I think that relationship with your manager and the trust that you have with your manager is a key part of that as well.
Yep.
And the behaviour that they exhibit. So you talked about the blame before. I remember many, many years ago I worked in an organisation and if something went wrong, the first thing was who did that?
Yes,
and it wasn't what happened and what do we learn from that, but who. And that just in of itself would say, we're out for blame and not to learn or grow. Yeah.
Oh, it makes me feel ill. It's a horrible way to function in a company. And you see it, it's a really toxic environment when you're looking for someone to blame or even a team to blame.
Well, actually, that's a good segue into wanting to talk about culture reset. What if you have a culture that possibly is a little bit toxic or needs a reset? And firstly, how would you identify that you have that problem?
You listen to the stories that people tell about working in that environment. And, there's a lot of ways you can look at it from a metrics point of view. So you can be looking at, if you've got the metrics, so engagement surveys, your turnover numbers, tenure, so length of service. There's all sorts of things you can look at, particular genders leaving, particular age groups leaving, all of those things. If you don't have all those metrics, then it's really a matter of listening to stories. It's listening to the language that people use and the stories that they tell, and seeing, do they talk about what they've achieved or do they talk about people in the company? And it's when you start hearing people talk about other individuals that you can start to go, something's just not quite right here. You should always hear people talking about the greater good of the organisation and the strategy of the organisation, or you hear people telling the stories that they've been told about the strategy or where the company's going. When they're just talking about other people or their manager or, those sorts of things, it's pretty toxic.
And sometimes it can be hard because if it's a particular team, they might not feel safe enough to talk.
100%.
And so sometimes it's the teams around that. So how are they engaging with other teams within the business? What impact are they having to try and get to the bottom of what's happening?
100%, because those toxic cultures can exist in just small pockets too.
Yeah.
So you can have a great culture, but you'll have one team that just has a toxic culture, which normally comes back to the manager. But quite often too, you can have a really high-performing person go into a management role and it's just not for them and they just create the wrong culture because they're not a natural leader or no one's invested in their people management skills. And so they're trying to bring all their technical skills in and manage people with technicalities, which just doesn't work. It's a different skill set. And actually it's a slightly different topic, but that different skill set between leadership and technical stuff, we haven't really adopted that well yet. We still don't see leadership and leading a company as a skill in itself. We still tend to, in the world of business, we still tend to take the people that are best at a particular thing and we put them into leadership roles.
Ask them to lead, which, as you said, is maybe not naturally their inclination.
No. And that will often be what builds a poor culture.
And if you have recognised that you need a culture reset, any tips how they would go about doing that? Any sort of practical things or things that you've seen implemented maybe locally or internationally in organisations?
I think if it's organisational-wide culture that you want to reset, it's getting a real understanding about why you want to do that. How does that link to your strategy?
100%.
What's it going to deliver? Getting your executive team aligned on that. And then ensuring that you've got some resource and plans in place, a few critical things that you'll do, some big symbols about what you're going to reinforce within the business, but also change agents within the organisation. But that would be a big program of work for an organisation, doing a big change. If it's a smaller team-based environment, a lot of it's working directly with the team to understand what their drivers and motivations are, what they want to achieve, and then how are they going to operate in order to deliver that. And I think that link to strategy, focusing on what the end output is and how you work together to get that is the key.
Yeah, and focusing on the right things. And I think when you really have to make a change culturally, often just picking that low-hanging fruit, doing the little things early on is a really good indicator to your organisation that you're here to make a change. So I was part of a company that was sold into private equity from unloved subsidiaries, sold off, new executive team brought in, and one of the biggest parts of the business was a contact centre, so a call centre, 300 people or something in the call centre. And one of the leftover policies from the old company was the dress code. So you had to wear shirts and pants. You're on the phone, you don't see anybody. And a lot of people that worked in this call centre, they were out-of-work actors and dancers and singers, so great personalities. And so one of the first things we did to say, changing this culture, is we took away the dress code. So wear whatever you want. We did, I don't think we really put any limitations in place. The really key thing about that, though, was we had team managers in that contact centre. What they managed was the dress code. That person's not wearing the right thing today. I'm going to have to give them a warning. Instead of, actually, they can't sell. So how about we focus on that?
What's important.
Yeah, the actual performance stuff. And the interesting thing, we took that dress code away and the whole place just livened up. Suddenly, people came to work with energy. They were themselves. They were really authentic, great outfits, became a really cool place to be. And every exit interview from someone that left, and contact centres, people do come and go all the time, but people always said, what did you love about working here? The dress code. It was really amazing to watch.
Isn't that amazing?
Such a
Small
tiny thing.
changes like that can really have such a big impact. And I think we all know hiring is probably one of the most challenging parts of both of your jobs, I'm sure, but in any business. And you both touched on the importance of finding the right people for those roles, especially management roles. How do you go about finding and identifying the person who's got not only the technical skills that you mentioned, but also that ability to lead and manage, and any advice on hiring more broadly?
I think for us, one of the things we've invested in is, hiring around potential for people. The business grows, things change, skills change. So looking for technical expertise, absolutely, but actually looking at what's people's learning agility, how are they adaptable and how will they grow with the business when we need them to.
Love that.
That's a really critical piece. Also ensuring that, the culture's right for them and they're right for us. I think often you come with the lens of, us assessing them, but really allowing them to meet many people within the organisation and make an informed choice about this is a right fit for me as well. And also using tools and technology that enables you to create a lot of community of candidates. So we've recently moved over to doing more talent pooling. Yeah. So we've got thousands of people who have actively sought out our business and want to work with us. And so we maintain a connection with them, even though we might not have an active job for them. But what it means is when we do have the right role, they're there, they're ready, they know us, we know them, and they can join relatively quickly. And that's been very successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really around, I talk a lot about processes and procedures and just making sure you've got a really solid structure around who you recruit and why. attracting the right people and really understanding your culture. But it's being able to define your employee value proposition. So it's actually being able to say, what is it that's good about this organisation and why is it that people come here and why is it that they stay? And defining that out in the marketplace, which is branding in itself. It's having an employee brand and making sure that employee brand lines up with your customer brand, which Vodafone does a great job of. But really being clear to employees, you're selling to them. You're selling them the opportunity to come and work for you, but they've got a million choices, right? Great talent has choices. So, you can't think, of course they want to come and work for us. It just doesn't work like that these days. You have to sell the role to them. You have to build a great profile out there. LinkedIn is really key now. And then really understanding what it is they're going to get out of coming to work for you, as well as what you're going to get out of them coming whichever way I just said.
And being real about that as well.
Oh,
There's some
totally.
things of your culture that you say, this is amazing, but there are some things that aren't that great that you would like to be different, and being really transparent about that in the process is important, so they don't start and then 3 months, 6 months later think, well, why did I come here?
This is not what I was
This is not
sold.
for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. And I think, and quite often you are bringing people in because something's broken. Yeah. So you just have to be so transparent with those things.
And how do you set those people up for success once they arrive? How do you allow them to really bring their whole self to work, really shine, as you talked about in the call centre, bringing all of their best self to deliver their skills and expertise in the right way? Do you have any policies or procedures or any other things that you've implemented that have really allowed people to do that?
I think from an onboarding perspective to set people up, we have not traditionally done really well in that space. It's hard. It involves often lots of different parts of the organisation to create a really good experience. And often what people really want when they first start is to have the annoying things out of the way so they can just do their job. Because there's the basic things you need to learn that can be really frustrating, like how do I use the printer?
Yes.
Which is so silly but frustrating. And so getting those fundamentals there.
Yep.
And we've done a bit of work in this space so that, people can start on their first day and they have everything ready for them, but it's not always perfect. But also, spending the time with them on the first day. We've reset that every employee now in our corporate offices starts on one day every month. And we did that because we wanted to make sure there was a consistent experience, that you had everything ready for you and that you had an induction program at that time with others who were also joining, where you were really clear about what was going and the experience was really managed. So actually you meet the HR team first and then we'll call your manager in the middle of the day and they'll come and pick you up, and then the steps that they do for the day. And that's really made a difference for helping people feel secure, but also well set up to get started.
I think when you've got a group starting together, it makes a huge difference. Back in that same contact centre, my team had an amazing system of bringing people in because you were bringing 10 people in at once. And we had an excellent recruiter. She would, give the team a heads up on all the different people in that team before they stepped in the door. So everyone kind of knew them already. They'd go to a technical trainer first. The technical trainer would say straight up, not sure about that person, don't really know how that person's going to go. So there was this constant communication from one handover to the next. Then they'd step into sales training. Sales trainer might go back to the technical trainer or back to the recruiter and say, just not sure about this person, or here's what you need to look out for. And then team managers would come in and they'd get the heads up on everything. So there'd be this really nice progression into the organisation. They wouldn't get on the phone until sort of day 4 or 5. And then they were fully monitored when they first did get on the phone. And it's really interesting because contact centre is not it's not a high-paid job.
Yeah.
Yet they would have got way more attention than most executives that start in an
I was just
organisation.
thinking that, so much more onboarding and hand-holding and those
Yes.
constant feedback loops that you just mentioned. that
Totally.
we certainly don't see in onboarding in a lot of organisations.
But they're also your customer-facing people,
Yes.
which is absolutely critical. But then again, that doesn't make sense because if we take the view I said before, which is around everybody is your customer, internally and externally, then you really need to find a process of that kind of onboarding for everyone. You want to make people feel a part of it really quickly.
And I wanted to talk about diversity in the workplace too. Obviously, it's something that's hugely topical right now, from obviously gender to ethnicities to abilities. And We know for a fact that people who have diverse cultures, companies are more successful. They generate more revenue, they deliver better results, they have happier customers. So how do you go about building a program internally to support and celebrate diversity in your companies?
So this is something we're really proud of that we've done organisationally, and we've been focusing for the last 2 to 3 years quite heavily in this space. There's a few tips that we've learnt along the way that helps you get a program off the ground. I think the first is learning a lot, learning within the organisation, understanding what's going on for people and where the focus areas need to be. And that's, through surveys, looking at metrics and just actually talking with people. Also learning from other organisations. So we spend a lot of time talking to other industries, other businesses in Australia to understand what they've done, what's worked, what hasn't, any advice that they've had about engaging with people, as well as different bodies like Chief Executive Women, for example, who gave us a lot of advice about, what you might expect when you embark on a gender equity program within the business based on their experience. And we've been fortunate to have Vodafone globally, who have got a lot of expertise in this space, to have a look at what they were doing. So that learning piece is really critical. The next piece was really galvanising employees around that. And we've done that through employee networks, and that's most of the advice we've had from other organisations to do that employee networks, not just to give advice, but to actually own the strategy, defining the strategy and delivering that across the business. So an example of that was our Connect committee, who support the LGBT community within Vodafone. They were the team that really put forward to our executive team that they wanted to sponsor Mardi Gras for the organisation, that they thought it was the right thing to do, that it was a significant investment, but something that really symbolised into the business and celebrated this is something really important.
Yeah, that's great.
And so they were, an employee-led initiative that they drove, and they drove that strategy, and it's something that we're really proud of.
That's really cool.
And so those networks, they're the things that have really made a difference. And the other is just measuring, again, like measuring is such an important thing, getting more feedback along the way. What's working, what's not working, who's on board and who's not on board, why are they not in that situation, and how can you help them? We've made a lot of progress along the way in that space. So our recent People survey, diversity inclusion is one of the highest rated things of what we do well at Vodafone. So, the investment and the impact has gone a long way to the employee experience.
So I found this stat really interesting. There's apparently 25% less turnover at companies that have flexible work policies in place. Do you think that that's something that you've implemented successfully internally? And what has it looked like for you? How did you go about creating those policies?
One of the key principles of flexible work is that work is a thing you do, it's not a place you go. And the sooner you have everybody actually believing that, the sooner a flexible workplace is actually going to make sense. One of the other principles is actually commercially, it makes sense commercially. We can't all afford real estate in the middle of Sydney City or other cities these days. So, if you're growing, you have to start thinking about where are you going to put people, and do we actually want to be paying that kind of real estate dollars? I think the third principle is everybody has to buy into it. If you have a flexible policy and none of your executive leadership team or your CEO doesn't use it, nobody else feels, again, not safe, I'm not going to do it. So I think they're the principles of it.
And I think it's about the work as well. Doing the work in the best way that makes sense to get the best results, and understanding that flexibility means something different to everyone. So not to make assumptions that what's meaningful for me is meaningful for you, or that working part-time or working for home is what's important for me. And having that tailored approach for the different parts of your workforce and ensuring that there's multiple options is really important. With a commercial lens on that as well, so that it's, you're still delivering results and not impacting customers and those sorts of things.
I think that's the big thing though, isn't it? It's results. Like, it doesn't really matter where you are or how many hours you put in or any of those things. Actually, they become quite irrelevant if you can achieve great results and lead your people well and all of those things. So if you can manage to get rid of it's really a shift in thinking for a lot of people. That presenteeism, I'm sitting at my desk thing. kind of gone. It feels so archaic for me now. So I just think, everyone just has to move on from that.
Yeah.
We should have moved on years ago, quite frankly.
The leadership behaviours are really important.
Yeah,
I think, and the
100%.
stories around that. So
Yeah.
we ran a campaign last year that we called My One Thing, back to that, what's meaningful for
love
you? What's the
that.
one thing? And it might be
Yeah.
because you've got caring responsibilities. It might be because you enjoy working out or you're part of a sports club or
Yeah.
something like that. And the leadership stories have been really powerful in that process. We had our commercial director, Ben, who posted a photo of himself, and he was coaching his son's junior rugby team on a Friday afternoon. So that was his one thing that he would lead on a Friday afternoon. But the power of that, and people just seeing that's something that a director's doing, and so therefore that's something that's accessible to me. And
Yeah, absolutely. But also this whole concept of the number of hours we work, the fact that that's baseline employment agreement type stuff, I find really strange. And it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me because, when you look at really great creative people or really, quite often really effective people might do 2 to 3 hour block and then have a 5 hour break and then do another 2 or 3 hours. They have their own ways of working. And so this solid 9 to 5 thing, and we're all going to comply with that. We all work like that. It does not make sense. It just doesn't work. I think you've got to look at what works for different people.
And I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, I think this whole concept of HR is changing so dramatically, and what that looks like and what that means in an organisation. And where do you think the change is going to continue to be in this space in the next sort of 12 to 24 months? I mean, I think you make a really interesting point there with employment contracts as a basis.
I think there are a lot of changes coming, and I feel like they should have happened years ago. I think from a people and culture HR point of view, it's becoming a lot more of a strategic role. If you can't talk data, if you can't talk numbers, if you don't understand the marketing function, if you don't participate in all of these things, then the role, you're not doing a great job of the role anymore. It's so much broader than probably it was even 10 years ago, where it was still coming out of that, or 15 years ago, it was coming out of that personnel days. It started to be called HR, and now we've all moved to people and culture, or just people, which makes a lot more sense. So I think that's changing.
I think the expectations of technology, so you were talking about at FPOS that you're doing the transformation from a HR technology perspective. We are seeing that as well, that the demands on technology, both from the HR team, they expect better tools to do their job, but also the business expects better tools from a HR perspective, the same way that customers expect a better digital experience.
Totally. Yeah. And it's little things like, I don't want to sign into 5 different systems when I walk in the morning. I just want one single sign-on. You want to simplify. I think that's simplifying the hygiene factors so that I can concentrate on my job. And then that goes back to flexible work, right? Because I want to be here as short a time as possible. I don't want to spend my day trying to figure out where stuff is. They're the sorts of things that are becoming really important to people.
And I think empowerment is another trend that will continue, both in terms of business leaders expecting more empowerment in decision-making and those sorts of things, but also people feeling more empowered to do their job. And what role does HR play to start challenging that more so that, people are empowered, have the tools that they need to do the job well?
And I think that is a really good point because, 20 years ago, HR did a lot of stuff for managers. You did the employment agreements, you did the interviewing, you said, here's your new person, I'm wheeling them in for you now. It doesn't work like that anymore. Your job is to guide and coach and put all the systems in place so that people managers can do their jobs well. So our job is all about empowerment. It's all about supporting and guiding and all of those things. It's enabling. 100%. It's enabling everyone else. And HR always had that terrible reputation of being the policy police. Oh, I hate that. But HR's here. Everyone shut up. It's the worst.
Yeah. So
hopefully we're getting away from that.
Slowly changing in the right direction. Exactly. And so before we finish up today, I would just love to get a few tips from you, large or small, in this idea of building culture and growth.
Look, for me, it's not really a small piece, but it is really important. It's that knowing who you are as an individual before you walk into a workplace is really, really important, because if you are someone that puts on a mask every time you walk into work, no one, that connection, the relationships, all the things you need to enable everyone else and to build a good team just aren't there. And that, mask in a workplace, I mean, that was culture years ago. You didn't bring yourself to work, you brought your work persona to work. And I think more and more people want to get to know the authentic you. And that goes for leaders as well. So I think understanding who you are, working on yourself, doing your work is really important, because that will become, that'll become really important in the workplace. That, emotional intelligence is critical.
Yeah. I think being curious in the business,
oh my God, I love that word.
Asking questions, understanding perspectives and those sorts of things, because you can go out and see what other organisations are doing and think that's amazing, we should do that, but it might not be meaningful for your business, it might not be meaningful for your people, and usually the answers, will come from within as well. So the more
100%.
curious you can be about other people's experience and what they need, but also curious about yourself and the impact that you have and how are you growing
For sure.
is critical. Yeah.
Curious is such a great word. Like, asking questions before you start speaking is, such a great skill for anyone to have, but especially leaders.
Yeah.
And it seems to all come back to communication. Communication internally, externally, and building those feedback loops within those organisations.
Yeah, communication and storytelling.
Yeah.
I think you have to be able to tell a story. You have to be succinct in what you're saying, and be really clear with people.
They were some fantastic tips. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us, Julia and Fiona, and for all of your insights today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.